Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world listening to this. Welcome to the Talking Stick Show. So again, I'm joined by the outstanding, powerful Laura Massey for the co-host of this show. Hello, Laura.
Hi, Dale. Thanks for having me on again.
And it's an absolute pleasure to have you on. It's as I wouldn't say breeze is the right word to use, but when I'm speaking to you and you're coming on show, it's just so easy to work with you, and it's an honor. Thank you.
Fabulous. Same way. Thank you.
Thank you. And for this summer solstice special, we have a guest, Bruce MacDonald. Hello, Bruce.
Hello, Dale. Hello, Laura.
Hello.
Hi, Bruce.
So I have been listening to you, Bruce, since I heard you first on the Friday comedy show, Andrew Bartlett's comedy show. And I spoke to Laura saying that I wanted to really ask you some questions. I love how you use your linguistics, how you talk and explain and go into things. I really do enjoy that. So I've been looking forward to this interview.
Oh, good.
So if you'd like to tell the listeners, people who have not heard about you or don't know who you are, a bit of a synopsis about your journey and who you are, Bruce.
Okay, so my name's Bruce MacDonald. I was born in the nation's capital of Canada, Ottawa, in 1966. Had a pretty normal upbringing. I left home at 16 and just started banging around the world, living on my own. And at 19, I moved from Ottawa to Toronto. And I started writing at about 19, and I started meditating at 17, turning 18. I was a busboy at a steakhouse in Ottawa. And there was a poster on a cork board in a laundromat, and it was talking about meditation. And I went, "Oh, that's complete bullshit. I'm going to go and talk to these people." So I went to this meditation group, and I met them, and I went a few more times, and I learned how to meditate. And then I started meditating, and this was really unusual, okay? Because I mean, I came from a strict Catholic family. My mother was a Carmelite nun for a year before she got married. That's a silent order. They make the host for the mass and everything. And my grandmothers were insanely Catholic. I've always had this language ability. So in junior high and high school, I was winning the citywide competitions for public speaking. So all I would get for Christmas from my grandmothers were the Catholic catechisms, because they wanted me to become a priest. And true story. And I ended up just going in this meditation direction. It gelled with me. And so I started to meditate. And then one of my meditation teachers said, you should keep a journal of everything you feel and everything you see and everything you hear in meditation. And you should also keep a journal beside your bed to write down your dreams. And that is literally how I started writing. And then from there, I ended up with no high school diploma. I ended up getting into the best journalism program in North America, the Ryerson University journalism program. It was partly based on marks and then partly based on your years. And then you had to do a submission essay. You had to literally go there for 3 hours. They don't tell you what's going on. And then they just put you in this room, and you got to type for 3 hours and say why you want to go to journalism school. So that really helped me. And then another thing I love is I love traveling. I like not so much traveling. I love living in other places. So my first experience as an expat was in Taiwan. I was in Taiwan from 92 to 94. I taught English, paid off my student loans from university, and it was really good money back there. Then it was $25 US an hour in 1992, tax-free. So that's how I was able to pay off my student loans. I learned Mandarin, and then I came back home to Canada, had a child, raised my child, and then as soon as he was done high school, I'd had enough of Canada, and I came to Central America with him, and we built this house here. And throughout it all, I've been writing books, fiction and nonfiction, and my day job is technical writing. So right now, I work for I'm partners in a small company in Canada that writes a special kind of grant application for tax credit for technology companies. It could be anything. It could be medical resonance imaging, but I specialize in software and telecommunications. So I have this life now at 55, Dale. I work about maybe 40, 50 hours a month. I make very good money. I got the book royalties coming in. I started growing Abaca 3 years ago. That's doing quite well. That's a nice little farm. And then in 2023, my son and I are opening up a little tourism business where we go and stay with the Quebecar natives who are about 5 kilometers into the jungle from where I am. They have a beautiful reserve, and it's see, I don't know how to describe this. Like, you know, first of all, you're both European, so you guys have no natives there anymore, except maybe the Celts.
Or gypsies. I'm joking. Thank you, sir.
But in Canada, the natives pretty much live the same way that the rest of us do. They live in ranch. You know, you go to a reserve in Canada, it's a ranch bungalow, satellite TV dish on the roof, and a Ford F-150 pickup truck in the driveway. But here in Central America, the natives are like, they're like for real, like living the same way they've been living for 10,000 years. And the whole reserve has an energy about it. And the matriarch is reputed to be 130, 131 years old. Costa Rica officially recognized her last year as what do they call it? A centenarian, 100 years old, but she's much older than that. When my father-in-law came here, he died 3 years ago, but when my father-in-law came here to this mountain in 1947, she was already a grandmother. And she's just the most powerful person on the mountain. Like, she's everywhere. She's just everywhere. It's like her signature is all over the mountains. So there's a brief introduction to me. I like the life I've cultivated over here. It's just perfect. The only thing now is I'm looking for a good nonfiction or fiction project to work on. But other than that, yeah.
And you're working on you're doing an audio book, aren't you, at the moment? You're in the middle of going through that, which I listened to a few of the chapters, and incredible. I really liked that you told the story, but in the story there was teachings as well, and there was you think it's going to be one way, then it completely spins and goes the other way. So it's like element of surprise. I really enjoyed them so far. So what I've heard anyway.
Yeah, so I got this boom mic here, and after 6 or 7 years of living in Costa Rica, I finally figured out how to order things on Amazon. So I got this boom mic here, and I decided I would do some audiobooks. So this is my first novel. It published in Canada in 2007, got really good reviews. It got optioned for, and we got grant money from, like, I don't know what it's like in Britain, but in Canada, there's no Hollywood. So every movie that gets made in Canada is done kind of with the government through a grants program, right? Because film is very expensive. So I got a little bit of money, and then I had to work on this screenplay for like a year with a crazy French director from Quebec and a crazy French producer from Quebec who had this enmity they were carrying from a previous film. And I did 11 drafts of the movie, and then it just kind of blew up, and then I kind of walked away. You got to have a lot of tolerance to survive the entertainment industry. Like, it's unbelievably crazy.
Laura, did you listen to any of the
I did.
What did you think?
I got up to about chapter 23. Yeah,
wow.
I love your narration as well, Bruce. Love the way you read. Like Monty, it's very easy to listen to, and of course you're reading your own material, which I do think it does help because you're putting the emphasis in the right places too. But I loved it, and since you've just been introducing yourself and some of what's happened to you in life, I'm wondering whether some of that is in that audio book. I picked up on it. Yes, when you were saying about the nun.
Yeah. So, you know, I started that book when I was 19. Just there's one section in it there. So the Landlady Mrs Duncan, that was a short story I wrote when I was 19 years old. Now that was 1985, and I had just moved to Toronto. And I remember working on that book, you know, working through a lot of my upbringing in that book, right? Which, like I said, was intensely Catholic. And And look, I mean, the general principle that, you know, God is love and God loves us is true, but it pretty much ends there with the Catholics. It's just pretty much ends there. So, but
what was it?
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Bruce.
I had no idea how much, you know, that stuff had gotten into me, you know, and because I'd always had a yearning for consciousness. And so the only thing that was available to me was the Bible and the Catholic teachings, but it just didn't work, but my yearning was there. And I think there was something about that yearning that brought, that really embedded the Christianity. And then karmically, you know, I'm coming from, you know, a very, very, very warlike family, the Mcdonalds, right, that have been behind a shield for centuries and cutting off heads for religious disagreements. So, and just briefly, the audio book, and I'm going to republish the book under a new title. The original title was Coureur de Bois, which is, if you don't speak French, it makes no sense, but it was a big hit in Canada. So the new title is going to be God as an Economist, because yeah. So the other big thing growing up for me was money. My father was an economist who worked for the government, and he got pretty high up in the ministry. He got about 2-3 slots away from deputy minister. So, you know, we were always talking politics and money at my table. And when I went to journalism school for micro and macroeconomics, I got the highest marks in my year, like 124 students or something. Just like people couldn't, and it was the most dreaded course for journalism students because there was a little bit of math. But so I got the highest marks in economics. And so this book is a fusion of all the things in my youth and really the story of me breaking out of it. And both characters are me. I remember my agent and people saying, "Oh, you're William Tove," and I don't know. Am I? I live in the Talamanca Mountains now. The novel ends with Cobb in the Talamanca Mountains. You tell me, am I William or am I Cobb? It's a doppelganger story, like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, or Dr. Frankenstein and the monster, or the young captain and the stowaway in Conrad's The Secret Sharer. It's a classic doppelganger story, and it's a comedy. Like, I don't know if you guys have laughed, but it's insanely funny. It's insanely funny. Right?
Because I thought, is he taking the piss here? Or like, I didn't know what, you know, when you're serious and you're like, then it gets you and you kind of like,
oh yeah.
Yeah, because there's times you think, oh, this is quite not dark, but this is quite heavy.
Yeah,
you know,
then it flips.
City street stuff in, and then there's stuff that lightens it. Yeah, it's really good.
Laura, have you had any religious exposure when you were growing up at all?
Not heavily. Sunday school and a godmother who wanted me confirmed, but something in me didn't want that, and I was given the choice at 11 not to do that. But you know, like a lot of us in this situation, I was seen sort of as the black sheep, you know, the pagan, for want of a better word, you know. And my brother, love him, is very Christian, and the Bible, every word of the Bible is true, and you can't sit down really and negotiate any of that, because that's someone's beliefs. So
yeah,
I
go ahead, Laura. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
I was just wondering, Bruce, what was it like for you when you grew up in that religious environment? What was that kind of like the catalyst breaking point for you to move away from that? Was it when you said you first saw that meditation?
Yeah, so I didn't find a replacement path before I sort of consciously left my birth religion. I was just sort of in limbo for, I guess, from about 15 to 17, 18, so for 3 years. And remember, I left home at 16. So I was living in rooming houses and stuff like that. And I was working as a busboy in restaurants and things like this. And, you know, I would say that the mark upon me from that religious upbringing was so strong that really parts of it are indelible. And I mean, that's okay, because some parts of Some parts are like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are just absolutely beautiful. It's just all the legal stuff and telling you what to do in the Bible that's just nonsense. But you know, so but when I started to meditate, I was really predisposed to it. So I joined this meditation group, and I realized after 6 months I was having experiences that people in this group for 10, 15 years in their 40s had not happened yet. You know, they say all these things are going to happen, and I sit down to meditate, boom, second time it happens, I pop out of my body. And my early meditations were so phenomenological. I thought that's what meditation was, that it was all just like journeying and phenomenon. And then I realized, well, no, that's an aspect of it, but mainly it's just cultivating your stillness and all of that sort of stuff. But I had a lot of experiences early on, and then a lot of things, you know, started happening to me at a very young age that I didn't fully understand till I worked on the Galactic Historian with Andrew, but they had been happening to me, right? Always visitations when I meditate. It's either something will pop into my mind's eye, or it'll just be, there will be just a ball of light in my consciousness moving around and interacting with me, or several balls of light, different depending on, you know, where I am and how blue or white or things like this. And so for me, right out of the gate, meditation was extremely phenomenological. And so, I mean, I just loved it. And I was a very, very clean living young man. Like, I didn't go to any parties. I didn't lose my virginity till I was 20, 21. I didn't drink. I didn't smoke marijuana. And I mean, as clean a life as you could get. And this went on till I was about 37. And then I got divorced, and I moved in with a couple stand-up comedians. And then I encountered marijuana. and so I use that a little bit now. Actually, and over here I grow my own. I grow a little bit of a strain that predates Sinsemilla. So yeah, that's my early upbringing. But I think some future writing I will do, I might try to bridge a little bit more, because I can help a lot of people coming out of the Abrahamic system. And that is not a healthy system for people to be in. It's just complete control and dominance, all of it from Adam right to Muhammad. I mean, there's good stuff. Like, what could possibly be bad about doing a partial fast for 40 days in Ramadan? Who could agree with that? Holistic healers couldn't disagree. There is good stuff. It's the cumulative effect of the paths. And I've looked at all of them. Another little spiritual adventure I had in 2009 was I went to the Mevlevi order of the Sufis in Toronto, and there was a very well-renowned sheikh in Canada. He had come from Turkey, and I did the zikr prayer with them every Saturday night for a year. Now, I had to leave that because that got really kind of nasty, and they work with this is another thing too, is, you know, when you go and you interact with people on their path, and you've been doing your own thing for a decade or so, you have a unique perspective. You know, so I went into the Sufi Durga, and after 4 months, I said, okay, man, these guys are working with jinn or something. I'm getting poked and prodded when I'm trying to sleep at night. It was the most paranormal experience I've ever had. And then I went on later in my studies, I found out, you know, that the Mevlevi order was started in Turkey by Sabbatai Alevi, who was forced to convert to Islam in the 1600s. And well, that can't be good. So, but this is how I learn. I go into things and I get a little bit dirty, and then I go out and I shower and I clean myself, and I say, okay, what did you learn? So, yeah.
And it may be great to talk about this for a bit, religions and the ins and outs, and what attracts religion to people. Laura, what are your takes on religion? I know you were saying the free will, from your perspective of seeing it growing to who you are in the now. What's it been like for you, and what have you learned from it?
Well, going back to what you were saying about I think you were talking about the influence of religion, weren't you, on you? And yes, it does sort of take away your free will. Or I think, you choose to maybe give it away to words that you think are greater than your own and greater than your own intuition. So because I didn't have a very strictly religious background, although it is everywhere, and one of the things I love in what I was just listening to of Bruce is when he equates the cross, the crucifix is everywhere, and we forget it. It's what did you in the book? I think you described
the first brand.
Biggest, sorry,
it's the first brand. It's
yes, the first brand. That's it.
The first logo.
Yes,
you know,
like McDonald's.
Yeah, everywhere you go, there it is. You know,
so it's almost subliminal, isn't it? You're almost growing up with that, and it's subliminal. It's sort of there, but you don't sort of acknowledge it, and you don't always realize what it's for. It's like the kids at school. I mean, they do these Christmas plays and all that, and I don't know. I mean, you know, they're being taught and indoctrinated from a very early age, and I suppose I was, so I suppose it is in me. But I have probably, like Bruce and like yourself, a need to find some answers, and I don't always accept things at face value. And I have a great inquiring mind, and I want to know what's behind something. And I'm always, I suppose, like a lot of us, looking for the truth, whatever that is, because, you know, truth is what it is for you at this moment in time. But part of your evolution and your learning is you find a different truth that you align to, don't you?
Yeah.
So mine really, you know, going through various phases and reading different spirituality books, and then coming to Andrew a bit like Bruce probably, and yourself, is, well, that just turns everything on its head. And even now when he says stuff, it turns things on their head, you know, it just switches it all around for me, and I think I have to go on another quest. So Matty and I are trying to do this book. Well, I say trying because what's happened is the book, as I think you were alluding to, Bruce, is the book becomes a journey. So the book we're writing is now taking us both off on different journeys, and it will only add to the book itself, to the depth of the book, to the depth of experiences that you're recalling in the book. I mean, from what you were saying about Bruce, about your childhood, and from what I've been listening to on the audio, you know, I think the reason you met it feels so real, so authentic, is because you must have lived a lot of that, as you were saying.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much every character in the book is real. And so when I published in 2007, I took a little, now the wokeism wasn't as intense as it is now, but you see, being in the literary scene in Canada, in the mid and late 90s and right up until like about 2009, I stopped hanging around and going to book launches and everything. It was like the progressives and the wokeism on the left now, but it was like 25, 30 years ago, because generally these movements begin in academia and the arts. And so it was, I found the writers and the environment of writing I was working in was quite difficult. So for example, I did a couple tough interviews where they questioned, you know, my right to write a native character, and then I introduced him to my best friend, who's basically cop, and except he's on the opposite side of the law now. He's a special investigation unit senior detective, so he interviews police when they're involved in seriously harming a civilian in an arrest or something, or death. That's what he does for a living, and so I captured his grimness. And I've known him since we were 8 years old. We played on the same hockey team for 10 years. And he almost made it to the NHL. He was just a massive guy, 250 pounds. He ended up playing, I don't know how well you guys know hockey, but he ended up playing major junior hockey, which is a big step, because that is the feeding pool for the NHL, the National Hockey League. but he didn't make it. And then he went into civil service and he became a police officer. So I was let off the hook for writing the native character, right? The reserve described, I've been to multiple times. I believe Andrew's been to that reserve as well. That is the Weetongue Reserve in Trent, Ontario, which is about 2.5 hours east of Toronto and a little bit north. And the best reserve I've ever been on in my life. It's a magical place. You don't want to leave when you go there. It seems like a better way of living than the place you left. The parole officer is true. He's undoubtedly dead now. The schizophrenic character is absolutely true. I just basically changed the names. It's really nonfiction. And then I just put all my sort of spiritual consciousness into it and see how the whole story comes together energetically. And it's a very interesting beginning because, you know, Cobb has the vision in jail and gets contracted to his entity in their mythology. Then Will has this opening up experience, and then they kind of casually meet in the way they meet. And I can assure you, it just gets better and better and better. So, and you know what I'm noticing is how far ahead of its time that book was. It seems like it was written for 2022, not 2007. You know, with all of the systems crumbling and everything now. And then, you know, you got Cobb. For those folks who don't know, he's a Mohawk character, which is a tribe of a band of natives in Canada and northern United States. And they're known for cigarette smuggling, right? Which is like moving cigarettes into convenience stores, and you get because tobacco prices are incredible in Canada. I mean, just with all the taxes on them and everything. So there's the particular reserve that the real Cobb comes from. There's guys on that reserve with $50-100 million in U.S. bank accounts just from cigarette smuggling. I mean, it's as big as anything out there, right? So, and you've got Cobb, and so, you know, my childhood best friend, his real name is Dean. He's done quite well in the system. Like, I mean, he makes $200,000 a year as a civil servant in police and justice, right? But so the voice of discontent from the Indian perspective, I really appropriated that from his uncle Elmer. And his uncle Elmer actually did do 4 years for cigarette smuggling. And so this is where you've got Cobb saying these things and calling out the white man and colonialism and everything. And it's just like 15-20 years ahead of its time. I finished that book in 2003. My agent sold it in 2004. There was a 3-year waiting list at my publishing house. So it's 19-20 years. And now it's all just, it's the normal way we live now, except the truly the most abused and oppressed people in North America are still not getting any attention. It's not the Black population in America, although their situation isn't great. It's not women, it's not transgenders. The undoubtedly the most abused people in North America are our natives. Unbelievable. And they're sort of outside of all of this leftist wokeism and everything going, what's going on, right?
It reminds me of that film I'm watching. What is it? Have you seen Yellowstone?
Yes.
Have you seen the film? Yeah. Where the natives are kind of like crossing over, and there's kind of a bit of a weird karmic thing going on where obviously they were part of the land and their ancestors were that land, and all of a sudden the system took over, but there's still them going into the police force and so on. It's a really great film. Program. If anybody's not watched it, it's incredible.
Yeah, incredible resurrection for Kevin Costner's career.
Yes.
So over here in Costa Rica, I decided that the novel wasn't a great format anymore, and I had to evolve if I wanted to keep writing. And so I moved to nonfiction, which led me to Andrew. And that book literally changed my life. I mean, and still is. I mean, it's like a living presence inside me and all the information. And, you know, it sort of did to the whole spiritual movement, including the stuff I had learned in the East, what I myself had done to my Catholic religion when I broke away from it. Like it turned everything up. I'm asking myself, well, why didn't any of these meditation gurus explain time to me? Why are they always talking about sequential lives and past lives and stuff? And the question about why doesn't anybody talk about future lives, that occurred to me in my 20s, like almost 30 years ago. You know, after 5 or 6, I said, well, if you can read past lives, why can't you read future lives? And there's all these holes in our spiritual literature. Even the best paths on the planet are incomplete. And the only complete path you'll ever be a part of is the one you create for yourself. And then the only thing you're going to have to do is we have to find the discipline, right? Because the group stuff that the group consciousness they achieve in religion ends up providing a little bit more discipline and social momentum for the practice of the whatever it is they're practicing, right? And sort of in the more independent movement, like we're all in now, you really got to have that drive. But I don't think too many people are going to find their way to the Galactic Historian and finish it who don't already have that drive, because they've always obviously been seeking, if they find themselves to that book. That book literally is the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow for seekers, right? It really is. And I think it sets in motion a whole new way of interpreting reality spiritually. And I felt since the moment we published it that there's a lot of people who need to speak to it. A lot of people, like the Ayurvedic yoga system, the Tibetans, everybody, and say, yeah, this is true or this isn't true, because we have to evolve. I believe, guys, that if the next revolution on this planet is not spiritual, we're in a very difficult time. But of course, it is going to be spiritual. We're going into a short silver age, and we're going back into a golden age. So everything that's happening in the world is actually beautiful now, if you have the eyes to see it. On a day by day, not so beautiful for people in my family, like my brother, my sister, and stuff like that, where everything they've invested themselves in is crumbling, all these systems and everything. But if you have the eyes to see it, it's the most amazing time ever.
So let's talk a little bit about the book then. Laura, you were involved. What's your view on the book, and how did you meet Andrew? Let's talk about Andrew's teachings for a bit.
How did I meet Andrew? So in 2013, I was listening to him and Veronica Keane because I was very into doing land work. So I found him, and he was running the League of Consciousness Explorers then, which I joined.
I remember that.
I joined that and sort of came away from it. And obviously when I was ready again to listen, and then I couldn't get enough of his material. And then he approached those of us who did one of the mentorships with him. And he always says it's about the question. So if you get the question in tune with Andrew, you can get a flow, and he will just get into a flow, as Bruce knows. And that got all recorded, and all the I think we used to meet every Saturday, and all that Martina laboured at transcribing, which was brilliant. And then Bruce came on the scene. So this about October, Bruce came on the scene in January, I think, or behind the scene before then, but certainly we connected in January with the group. And then what was fun was, because we'd sort of been through this with the mentorship with Andrew, was then watching Bruce go through this with every like jaw-dropping something that Andrew would come up with, and Bruce's, you could hear the silence on the end of the line sometimes, but Bruce took to it so quickly. We were all absolutely amazed how he absorbed it, and he got the essence of the work straight away. And I think you also had some pretty interesting experiences while you were writing the Galactic Historian, didn't you? Because I think you got some seventh dimensional beings to visit you, and some other things. I know Bruce is like, when we'd meet him, he'd always have something that sort of happened, or he'd reach some other level of, you know, his mind blown again. And I suppose we were sort of used to that. And then you realise that Andrew is a bottomless pit. Don't know if a nice way of describing him, but he is a bottomless pit, because it's the Akashic records. So just ask the right question and you will hear something that you've never heard before, or nobody has ever spoken about in that way before. So for me, it's still learned. Look, every time I read that book, even though I help contribute to it, I learn something.
Yeah.
And Andrew will always say it's in the frequency of the words, the vibration of the words. And I had a chat to him recently and I said, you know, Matty and I are doing a lot, but we don't want to keep repeating your words. You use your phrases. And he said, no, do, because they are the teaching. And then you realize the words he uses and Bruce is using, and I hope I'm coming to use, are the new linguistics that is needed as we're coming to what I would call the fifth world of peace. So we're coming to this golden age. We need a new set of linguistics because the old linguistics carry a lot of old energy. So it's teaching people these. So yeah, so he said, rather than not using my words, use them. Because, you know, that's the reason he's brought all this these new terms, this new wordage, these new beautiful descriptions forward, so that we can use them and have them as our new linguistics. And I think it's, you know, writing is a huge contribution. This book is a huge contribution, The Galactic Historian. Yeah. Absolutely. And I don't think that it will be fully recognised for a few years either, because I think it's still in its early days. And I don't know, have you thought about doing a follow-up, Bruce? Because you could have
I'm open.
Series.
I'm open to it. Absolutely. I'm absolutely loving this audiobook phase now. So when I'm done my first novel, I want to do some classic books that have lost copyright and they're open source, and just do really good audio of them. And there's all these sites now where you can download copyright-free sound effects and music, so you can really kind of get that old, like, 1935 radio show feel. I love it. I absolutely love it. Right.
Yeah.
So I feel that Andrew is an ordained incarnation, right? Meaning that everything was timed, and there's a reason he came in now, and we were owed an explanation. Okay, so there has to be disclosure down here. This is part of the rule set. It may be in a manner that you don't recognize immediately. You may dismiss it, but there's always disclosure. And so things had become so knotted up in the timeline wars and the Orion wars and everything, and all these things people talk about and lose themselves in, because people go into these little black holes and they just lose their whole life, you know, riding this hobby horse, this mad passion, whatever it is, you know, the Anunnaki or you know, various aspects of this, and they don't quite get it right. And they get maybe a part of it right, but they certainly don't get the whole thing right. And, you know, what Andrew's work does is, it just, for anybody who's seriously curious, it answers, this is what happened, you know. So it occurred to me about 15 years ago that the laws of karma might not be 100% consistent, right? You know, because I've always been sort of a spiritual scientist myself. It's not that they're not consistent. It's just that there were a lot of timelines kind of crisscrossing and stuff like this. And isn't it interesting, right after we finish the book, this becomes like one of the main things people are talking about all over the world now. Every other movie now is about the multiverse, everything all at once, Infinity with, who was it, Mark Wahlberg or whatever, and, you know, Spider-Man into the multiverse. And you know, I had never heard these concepts before I started working on the Galactic Historian with Andrew. And then boom, the moment we're done the book, it's everywhere. It's just sort of everywhere. Now, the danger now is that it gets out incorrectly, right? And so this information has to be explained correctly. But it all speaks to a wonderful future for the human race. You know, wonderful, whatever we have to go through. And there may be a partial depopulation as we wean ourselves off these large energy centric cities that are producing, you know, electricity and require gasoline and all these things to operate, and all your food the way we live, I think, is going to change but I mean, overall, when you think about it generationally, it's phenomenal what's going on. And then Andrew, I think, is really sort of creating the fork in the road for the people who are going in the 5D direction. And, you know, this is sort of like the lit up runway at night. Land your plane there if you want to. It's just, I can't begin to tell you guys how proud I am of, you know, being a part of that book. You know, I've already prepared my snapbacks in my afterlife review. Yeah, but I wrote the Galactic Historian. And this, and yeah, but I wrote the Galactic Historian.
I first saw Andrew's material 2012. It was basically the era where I was in a bit of a looking into, say, light worker stuff, those channel messages which said the same shit over and over again that we're going to send tomorrow. Pleiadians are going to come down. All that.
Yeah.
that slice of time back then when all that was kind of being shown and thrown online. And I actually typed in, because I remember I had a realization. I was at my mum's house and I finished work, and I was really the only one who was looking into this. My other friends didn't give a shit about it, didn't want to look into it. And I remember thinking to myself, it's like, who knows what happened? I remember saying this to myself, who knows what happened? What happened 100 years ago? Are we being told the truth? And I want to find someone who reads galactic history. And I remember saying that. So as I got on my PC, the PC or whatever it was, some really odd computer, started typing in Ascended Master Galactic History training course. And I remember putting it in, and all of a sudden, Andrew's GH, it was like part 9 or 10 was there. And I turned it on, and it was just, for the first time listening to him, it was hard, because he was speaking at a frequency and the pace, and I was just like, I was getting little snippets of what he was saying. So I had to go back and listen to it, and it was, I'd say, addictive at first. And so I just watched all of them, and I had that realization of, wow, there's actually someone de-weaponizing information, and actually all the teachings are there, the ceremonial living, so on and so forth, and what actually real happened. So for me, it was that, literally had that thought, right, I need to find the history, typed it in that synchronicity. I had my first reading with him in 2013 as well, and I think then I wanted the instant gratification questions. I asked all of those straight away. got those out of the way.
Does that.
Yeah. Where am I from, Andrew? So we got that, and over the period of 8-10 years, I've probably had about 5-6 sessions with him, and he's completely changed my life in a way that he's not changed my life, but he's made me realize that I am a master of my own reality, and I have to be responsible for my energy, for my cleanliness, for myself, so on. So that was really when I first listened to Andrew's material. So how did you actually meet Andrew, Bruce?
Through Monty.
Okay.
Yeah, Monty and I had been working together at a radio station. I had a morning. So there was a radio station Andrew used to be a part of too, and he did the morning slot Monday to Friday from 10 to 12 Eastern Standard Time. And then I came in and did the same slot 5 or 6 years after he left. And I got to know Monty, and Monty could see clearly that I was coming from a meditative background, and I'm extremely well read in scripture. Like, I mean, I could sit down with any professor at a comparative religion department. That helped immensely writing the Galactic Historian. So this might been my favorite form of reading my whole life. Relaxation for me on the weekend is sitting down and reading the Bhagavad Gita or the 100,000 Songs of Milarepa, or some 700-year-old Sufi text or something. I just absolutely love that stuff. It almost got to the point where I was a rare book collector. Now everything's digital. I don't read as much anymore now. Another thing Andrew brought back, which I threw out when I left the Papists. You guys know what a Papist is, right? Someone who follows the papacy. When I threw out the Papists, I kind of gave up prayer. And I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to meditate. That's enough. And I never spoke out loud. And what that did was it cut off part of the heart energy of my path. And so I reconnected with all that. The prayer is absolutely beautiful, but it's best if you create your own prayers. And very, very powerful. And just don't ask for anything selfish. Just ask for illumination, ask for clarity, ask for whatever you need, right? But as I get back into prayer and I see how powerful it is, there's just these temptations now. Well, maybe I could do this, maybe I could do that. And you gotta fight those temptations, right? Because you don't, the last thing we want to do is go into a higher consciousness where everyone is using it in a very negative way, right? And it's just all white and black magicians squaring off, and it's just so.
It's interesting when you talk about that prayer, Bruce, that there's always that religion aspect, I feel, with maybe karma, past life stuff, or this life stuff, when the majority of people on the workshops, when we go and talk about prayer, and I try and, if people can do prayer for like 5 minutes in the free flow, and everyone struggles pretty much, there'll be like one person who doesn't struggle, because all they're thinking of is that religious aspect, and that kind of religious cloud comes over them. So it's kind of like Andrew does, de-weaponizing and completely changing it around. And like you, Bruce, your linguistic and speaking is great, and for people to realize that they can do that, they can learn and go into that flow and actually access the unknown and go into the flow, and it's a beautiful feeling, that is. Yeah
So all this stuff has opened up for me now in the last 3 years, right? So I mean, I guess you could say I had visitations in the past, but maybe I didn't understand them properly. But now it's just, I mean, it's just unbelievable. And then I think that a lot of stuff was very, very curious when I was writing the Galactic Historian, and just would pop in. And a book like that, it affects everybody in your house, right? So it affected my dog, it affected my cats, it affected my wife profoundly. Just working on that book and having that energy and everything that was interested in that book coming around, and just kind of popping in and taking a look at you either psychically or in some other way. And there was just an endless series of concatenated synchronicities working on this book. Like, one synchronicity is like, you can run it through a statistical model and say, what are the chances of that happening? When you get into like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them joining together like a skipping stone, it's just, you couldn't come up with a probability matrix with a Cray computer. It's just impossible. It's literally kind of a miracle, right? And so I saw all these, I call them passive miracles. An active miracle would be like some physical transformation, like, the Red Sea parting or what have you. A passive miracle is when you experience something that it's impossible that it happened, and yet it happened, right? And you can't really share them. Like, people will think you're nuts if you try to explain them, and you just go, okay, well, that was just for me. And just like dozens and dozens and dozens of those working on the book, dozens, right? Just like constantly, it was like Price Waterhouse or KPMG coming in spiritually to underwrite everything. Yeah, this is true. Check that out. Yeah, this is true. And it just, so, and the big thing, just, we've gotten into this before, but it's one of my favorite topics, is the difficulty of Andrew's work in a book format was structuring Andrew. Like, how do you structure Andrew, right? It's almost impossible. So we ended up going with this epigrammatic, short sections that are very poignant and make one very clear point. And then as you build out into the book, they start to build on each other, and you start to understand Andrew's cosmology. You're like literally participating in it. And that I think is how the book worked really, really well. Yeah.
Beautiful. And yeah, for you, Laura, what did you actually, so for you getting involved in the book, what did you do, and what was the process you were involved in doing that?
Well, Bruce took the transcripts and then did the writing. Brilliant writing, as I was saying. He understood the material almost straight away, and the way he was able to present it was just, that blew my mind as well. That was just amazing. So we were quite involved in the editing towards the end as well, and bear in mind, there is a lot of stuff that we couldn't fit into the book, isn't there, Bruce?
Yeah.
There's a lot, and there's always going to be, more material with Andrew. It's always, there's always there, isn't there? More material is available. So a lot didn't go in. So yeah, I remember having that discussion about how on earth do you take all Andrew's material and how are you going to present it, you know, sort of sequentially? How does that work? So I think in the end it was like, it's not a coffee table book, but something you pick up and you read a chapter. And as Bruce said, it's contained, sort of the question and answer is contained in that chapter, because there is a lot of high frequency material to read it cover to cover straight off. You know, there is. So in some ways, giving it to people like that so they can pick up and read a chapter and maybe not pick it up for a couple of days, because you actually have to digest that material as well. I mean, although some of it I'd heard before, there was a lot of new stuff, and I was, again, working through the layers, you know, stuff I thought I knew, I was looking at it from a different angle. And then Bruce is very clever with his words, or brilliant with his words. So it made me look at it from another angle yet again, and find yet another meaning in there. And it was just a phenomenal experience and a huge part of my growth. It really was. I mean, it's just such a phenomenal book. But just talking about Bruce's book, Stardust Ranch is the other one that just
that was great.
To Monty
great one, Laura.
that has to put in my mind as well. That is
so there was a chapter in that book called The Crossroads, a very long chapter, about 7,000 words near the end of the book, where we talked about the Industrial Revolution. Yeah. And that literally pantomimed, you know, talks Andrew had given. He talked about, you know, the Industrial Revolution being this huge thing as well. And I was able to see that. John Edmonds, by the way, was another celestial medium. I mean, whatever had happened to him on that ranch, he had transformed his consciousness completely. John could completely communicate telekinetically. And there's another thing, you know, Andrew, you know, so they all have this ability to communicate, or in the case of Andrew, it may not even be Andrew. It may be agents on the astral or causal plane working on his behalf, right? That come and help you with the book. With Stardust Ranch, it was John himself. He was like just around all the time in my dreams. Very, very strong presence. And that was also a very, very phenomenological book up here on the mountain. We had portals opening up, and in the house, furniture moving. That was probably the most phenomenological. And I found out, you know, subsequently that this is a protected space for me. Like finding my way back here, I'm connected to this area, the Talamanca Mountains, in ways that are bigger than this lifetime. I won't go into them in this call. And getting back to my soul family, which is here in the Talamanca Mountains on the astral and on the physical. And so I was able to do these books, and I don't think I would have been able to do them if I was still living in Canada, in Toronto or so. I would be broken down a lot more by the electromagnetic energy. Something would get into me, it would spoil my mood, and the book would blow up. But up here, I was able to do it. And it's just because of the level of protection I have up here. And these books are sad. I don't want to say anything that resurrects my old Abrahamic roots, but these books can be a bit dangerous. You know, they can be a bit dangerous. I mean, this is another thing that I really became upset with the lineage teachers. You know, that the meditation schools and stuff, like, you know, why don't you ever talk about, we're in the middle of a spiritual war here. I understand sacred neutrality, but even staying within sacred neutrality, you can help people and help them understand that we are in a spiritual conflict here. But they're all, you know, so what I came up with a phrase to describe, you know, these kinds of paths, whatever they be, like even Ayurvedic yoga and some of the high paths of India and stuff. I call it civilian spirituality. And like when you get into Andrew's material, well, you're in the game, and you're on your own. and you're not following a path that has made contracts with entities on another dimension to shield you from stuff. It's out there, and that's how you learn. You know, you got to go out and have experiences and be knocked around a bit and be frightened a little bit, and then I mean, it's really like stepping on the first step of the school bus when you're 5 years old, right? You're going to a new environment. It's the same thing with consciousness, and there's just so much fear and complacency in all these paths on the path in the world now. All of them, even the high vaunted paths like Tibetan Buddhism and stuff. It's just they've just stagnated somehow, all of them. And it makes sense when you understand the time we're in, right? And so Galactic Historian is kind of a fertilizer for the soil of consciousness, and things are going to grow out of it over the remaining part of the 21st century and well into the 22nd century. But we're going to reach a point where we don't need books anymore. I will become obsolete, because everybody will have the consciousness to understand it completely. Yeah.
And thinking about that, I remember 2012, 2013, the era of those channel messages when all those were going out. They kept talking about the golden age. That's what I kept hearing back then, was 2035. Do you remember those days when you kept saying that? Saying all the light workers, angel workers were going 2035, Atlantis, this is the timeline, blah, 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 blah. And I was a bit kind of on the fence about everything, and listening to Andrew's materials actually made me realize how deep, and like you say, Bruce, the amount of timelines we have going on here, the graduation timeline, the above, below, all of those different things, which is made me aware of. But it's interesting you talk about you say the silver age we're in at the moment, which Andrew talked about as well at some point, and we're kind of going into that golden age. Let's talk about the event then, Bruce and Laura, and what is the event for people listening, Bruce?
The event essentially was a direct intervention by the Prime Creator into this physical reality. And it was set up over multiple timelines, and it was meant to deal with all of the mischief that had gone down here. And we don't have enough time to go into why the Earth is such a special place, but the Earth is a special place, Well, I guess I can say it's a 7th dimensional seed planet. And so this has been really a kind of a hothouse for a long time. We're a greenhouse, we're plants growing in a greenhouse, the human genetics on this planet. Now, John Edmonds told me the same thing. He said, we're a hothouse, Bruce, and I said, it was just so depressing the first time I heard it. I just wanted to jump off a cliff. and then so when I got to the Galactic Historian, I went, oh my God, this is true, right? This is absolutely true. And then, I started getting my visitations. And again, it's when you're ready, they'll come, right? And now I don't spend a lot of time talking to extraterrestrials. It has to be I've set up sort of a filter in my consciousness, like this better be important, right? Don't come because there's no milk in the fridge or anything like that. I mean, so they pop in once in a while. I've had a few groups who want to work with me, and it's very flattering and everything, but I generally will say no, unless it's something really, really important. And the event happened basically in 2014, and the timelines merged, and there's no way of getting out of what we're going into now. And to make the event possible, the dragon energy was brought back into the planet. This is why we talked about, Bruce Lee and the dragon clans, and they were brought in as a kind of universal marshal service to make sure nobody who had created karmic mischief on planet Earth did not close it off. And so they were all brought back here. And so you can just
watching The Crow about 2 hours ago, Bruce. Brandon Lee's. I literally watched that today. That's funny how you brought up.
Yeah. It was a big effect on. So I'm Bruce and my son is Brandon, and I followed that pattern with the Lee family, right? So, so the event is what the Prime Creator did. Now, as you get in, when you first hear this, you think, well, I don't know if that's true or not. And then when you go out and you investigate it a lot, there's a lot, it's everywhere. you know. So even let's call them the controllers, or the people physically incarnate in human form who are part of the control structure on this planet to keep the farm going and everything, you know, they had resources to look at things and look at the future as well, like the yellow boxes. And around 2012, 2014, everything was coming up. Okay, it's going into a golden age. This everything we've been doing can't go on anymore. And so it's everywhere. That idea is everywhere. And there's nothing to do. I mean, all the work you have to do to go into this is work on yourself. And then you create the vibration where you can be a part of it. And those who don't make it, I don't know what will happen to them. They'll go to another creational experience that suits them at the vibration they're at. There's really no penalty. It says, you know, everybody gets what they want at the end of the day. And so you really got to be careful what you ask for, and you really got to make sure it's what you want, you know. So so the event happened, and it's been going on for about 8 years now, since 2014. There are several dimensions to it. One of the things that the Prime Creator did, according to Andrew, was he used a lot of walk-ins. Okay, so let me just hypothecate here. We may be looking at a situation where, like, a significant percentage of the U.S. State Department is occupied by walk-ins now, and they're not going to follow the orders coming from above them. and that, I just chose that institution arbitrarily. But if you look at what's going on in the world now, nothing bad is working. Like nothing bad is working. And I would say we in the Western Alliance are the tip of the spear now for the bad. And that's not really a great thing to say about my birth culture, but it is quite simply the truth. I mean, we've done some extraordinary things for the world with technology and society and law and order and commerce and all of these things. And those aren't bad things, but we just can't keep going on the way we've been going on. So there's the inside scoop, folks. The party's over since the event. Yeah. Change your ways. The time isn't at hand.
And anything you want to add, Laura?
Yeah, the very fact that they're sort of tightening the old thumb screws, and with fuel prices and all the other things that put people back in survival, is actually a sign that consciousness is rising, because them that are left have got to, you know, throw it all in. They've got to put everything in there they can, but it's a losing game for them. And yes, that's what I learned from Andrew too, about the event already happening, and not like probably you and I, Dale, used to think back in 2012 about the spaceships coming. And well, I remember
Galactic Federation.
Yeah, I remember reading that you'll be sat next to somebody who would turn into crystalline form, and they disappear off the setting next to you, and thinking, wow.
All these breatharians as well living everywhere.
Yes, so at least Andrew put us right on that. So yeah, so the work is, as Bruce said, I mean, it's got to be sovereignty. And if you don't like all the crap that's going down, then out-create it. You can do, like Bruce is talking about, synchronicity upon synchronicity. The universe opens doors for you, and you start living in divine flow. You start having your dragon wings that lift you above all of this. That's you're then working with your dragon energy. And boy, as you know, you fly. You do fly. And yes, there's all this going down. And yes, we have to be part of the system, whether it's pay our taxes or, you know, I still have bills to pay. But just through doing Andrew's work, and just by claiming my sovereignty, I say just, I mean, it's a, you know, it's a daily thing, isn't it? It's a daily practice that you do. You sort of exist in both worlds. So you walk in both worlds. So yeah, you're part of this thing where, you know, you have to conform to a certain extent. I don't have a problem with that. I used to, you know, I used to think everything was, we had to overthrow revolution, and we had to get rid of this and get rid of the banking and so on. And then Andrew brings in this concept that there's a love virus going through the banks. And this was something he spoke about quite a few years ago, and that gradually, it's a gradual change as people raise, as people do their work and raise their consciousness, and you affect the consciousness of people around you, then people, middle management and so on, will change. And change that way is slow. It seems slow for us to sort of can see it, can see the finishing post, if you like. But then again, is there ever a finishing post? You know, what's the next thing? You know, when you think multidimensionally, it's like huge. I mean, I don't ever want to think small again. You know, the beauty of Andrew is he talks micro and macro. So he deals with you as a 3D person now going through daily life, and as this immense being in all these other timelines and what you're doing. And it's not even like, as you're saying, Bruce, not even like a past life, it's like a concurrent life on another timeline. And when you start grasping some of these concepts, you see the enormity of the being you actually are, and how, if you actually take this on board and do the work, you tune into all your other selves and you call in pieces and parts of them that are going to help you now. Yeah. So I have managed, despite a situation that could have put me into survival mode, I'm thriving because I know it's my beliefs, but my beliefs are, from what Andrew has taught, you do the work and you claim your sovereignty. And you're not doing any harm to anyone else, you're just out creating. And out creating is anyone can do if they choose to. You've just got to make that choice. And no, not everybody will. And as you say, Bruce, no penalty for those who don't. It's just where they are on their journey.
Yeah. And I would like to add, provoked by what you said, that a lot of times, you know, you're getting it right when the stuff you're doing and the stuff you're practicing spiritually leads to creative expression. Creative expression is the way we live in the moment. You know, I have these chats with my son all the time now. You know, he's 25. He's going to go back to university. He just went to work after high school. I said, you know, figure things out. You know, you don't have to, you know, fit into a mold or anything. And when you're ready, you'll be able to do what you want to do. So, you know, he went out and worked some really hard jobs, some construction with cement and concrete and stuff like that. And he liked it. He's paid well and everything. But, you know, eventually you come to this creative expression in your life. And I think creativity is like the highest state of living. And it can only be achieved with this spiritual synthesis in your life. And so it's the tagline I use with my son is, look, a life you create is much better than a manufactured life you fit into. And you're not going to be able to fit into the manufactured life. You're my son. It's just not going to work for you. So, and you know, we come from a family of very manufactured people who've done very, very well. My brother's done very, very well. And my father did very, very well. My sister does very, very well. So my sister is a film producer in Canada. My brother he's retired now, but he was a chartered financial analyst, and he pretty much managed the Canadian pension fund, about $78 billion, right? And typically in my family, when they retire, they golf every day till they die. And I'm looking at this going, my God, that is the best thing you can think to do with all the financial you've achieved. But I love them. I mean, they're my family and I love them. And, you know, so, but it's just, for me, I've got to just be going 100%, and I'm not slowing down at all. I mean, I'm 56 in July and I'm just still as crazy balls to the wall as I've ever been. You know, I'm just expanding my projects and my businesses here in the rainforest, my relationship with the natives to get this adventure and this tourism adventure with them going, and just constantly living. And really, you know, the ultimate book I wrote was myself. I mean, what I've done on this mountain with this earth bag home and everything, and the way I've lived, it's like a book, except I'm living it and I'm not reading it. And this is what I mean by creative living. And everybody can do it in some fashion. Everybody can do it. And the big thing is going to be able to, is just accepting accepting yourself as an individual consciousness on the planet. And that's difficult for a lot of people because they derive their identity from their title in the workspace and their status in their group or their family and all of these sorts of things. And it's all bunk and it's all going away. You're either genuine going forward or you're not. And a genuine person will be living autonomously and creatively.
Yes. Yeah.
And it may be a good time to go on to the tipping point then of, say, we talk about the event, of when the event happens. I remember Andrew talking and saying that there'll be people marching in big numbers, say millions of numbers, and had this realization when I was in the car the other day. I looked at the petrol prices, which we were talking about, Laura, and I said, right, if I'm really interlinked and say if I was really involved in the system and didn't have my spiritual practice, how would I feel in this moment of time? And it's looking forward into the future, and the timelines is, say, if inflation keeps going up, is there going to be a point where the humanity, and like Andrew said, when people are going to be marching, when's that, going to come into fruition? Is it going to be because of everything's just so, you can't buy anything, you can't have any of your own money, you can't have your own savings? I'm trying to figure out and kind of play around with how is it going to happen? These people, everyone marching, going, right, let's all start marching now because enough's enough. So your thoughts, Laura and Bruce, on that.
Well, it's definitely happening. You might not see it on your mainstream broadcasters like the BBC where you guys are, but it's definitely on YouTube. The huge crowds in Eastern European, Western European, and North American cities, and in Asia, and everybody's had enough. Another beautiful thing that's going to happen, I think, is that we're finally going to achieve a sense of human family. This is what a consciousness jump will do, right? We're not going to be as terrified of each other anymore. Oh my God, the Chinese, and oh my God, the Russians. And what are the Chinese and the Russians? I mean, you got a handful of psychopaths in Moscow and a handful of psychopaths in Beijing. And then you have all these beautiful people who want to live the same way as you and I and benefit from the event and grow in consciousness. So their days are numbered. But they're going to play their roles right to the end, right? This is going to be more method than Robert De Niro in Raging Bull. There's going to be very few defections, and that's what they have to do. They have to, go right off the cliff like the buffalo herd. But I don't think they could really address the hypocrisy of it, or just look people in the eyes and say sorry. It's not in them. A lot of these characters are pretty dark. I mean, some of them are gone now. I think George Bush Sr. was one of the darkest on the planet. Probably
gave me the willies, that guy.
Creepy
guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the whole story's got to play itself out, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And it's
absolutely.
It's interesting that I remember Andrew talked about on the last show, was how the narrative keeps changing. And this Amber Heard case, I think I talked about in the last show, was how it changed all this Ukraine, kind of the war in print coming at us, war. Then all of a sudden the Amber Heard case came and it flipped, and you didn't hear about it anymore, and everyone just stopped talking about Ukraine. And it just shows you how easy and how they're not controlling everything like they were, that nothing's stuck like it was back when the 9/11 happened and all of that stuff came on after with Tony Blair and George Bush. You can really tell that it's not sticking anymore, isn't it?
Yeah, and the way they use distraction is actually working against them now. So the way system uses distraction is actually distracting from some of the big stories, probably the fear stories that it wants to put out there. So I think it's getting itself in a bit of chaos and in a bit of mess. And when you're going to put people in as much survival as they're trying to now, you are going to form these communities. It's already happening. I see it locally. People are starting to look after each other. Even having a camper van, it's right. Okay, can we use stuff from the camper van indoors? Is it going to be cheaper to use a camper gas stove indoors than with the canisters than it is to pay the gas here? I don't know. It's things people are looking at that. Communities are coming together, to do things. So the more they do it like that, almost the worse it is for them. And then the more they panic and the more they go to another extreme measure. And I think it's just part of the karmic pattern of Earth and us that has to play itself out. So it's nothing I'm in fear about.
And it'll be interesting with the say 10 to 15 years when we're going into the closer to the galactic central plane, that the Earth will have enough energy to start letting out more of its ley lines and womb chakras and everything. And I remember there was one show which I've just heard this once, but he was talking about Hollow Earth and what's going to happen with the Hollow Earth beings. And he said there will be a point in 10 to 16 years, he said, that the Earth will be able to have enough energy to start kicking them out. And that for me was like, when you hear someone like Andrew say that, because he didn't really give you that stuff much about, right, this is a date, this is the events happening here. He had that, when he said that, it really kind of gave me that really warm feeling through my heart.
Yeah. Yeah, we're good. It's all good times going forward. And it's a lot of people would think we're crazy for saying this in middle of 2022 with what's going around, right? But it of course it's true, and you just need the eyes to see it. And it's inescapable now what's happening, and it's going to be beautiful to watch. And everything we've gone through is completely natural. Going through the Kali Yuga, the Dark Age, the Iron Age is completely natural, right? And it just is. It is part of living down here. And my God, what a wonderful experience, and what an incredible blessing it is to be alive and to be able to live consciously and get the most out of it, right? I couldn't be happier.
Oh, I agree, Bruce. It absolutely is. It really is. When you don't choose fear as an option, then you open so much more, because you don't make yourself so small. And when you open up to the true being you are and the infinite potential you have, then everything that, I'm not saying it becomes insignificant, but in some ways it does. All the little worries of life, you have to get that eagle eye view, don't you? Yeah. You have to use that eagle eye view and look at it from, this is as it should be. Do your best, look after yourself, take care of yourself, take care of others where you can, and claim your space on this world at this time, because you are here to make a difference, and you do make a difference by the work you do on yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the most important thing. And, as we grow into this new age, there's a lot of things we can do for each other. There's a lot of ways we help each other. So many people are becoming adept healers now, and stepping in where allopathic medicine has completely, harmed people. I myself might organize, I don't know, this year, maybe next year, I think I'm going to have somebody come into my place and do a ritual on my mountain. So we have a small group of people who smoke crack here. And so it's really funny when you see it rurally, right? Like, you're used to seeing crackheads in the city. And we know them all. There's no anonymity, right? So it's like, we know them all. And my wife's grown up with a lot of these people, and they fall into get divorced, their woman leaves them, they fall into a little depression or something, and then they get into crack. Well, what's to stop me from just having somebody come to my place for a weekend and to do an Ibogaine ceremony? Explain to them what it is. It might provide an opportunity for you to leave this life behind you in 72 hours. Do you want to take it, or are you happy with this? And if they say yes, just set it all up and try to help them. Whereas the system, I don't know, it doesn't seem to help anymore. Like the 28-day rehab programs and stuff like that. This is another huge thing over here in Costa Rica now, is plant-based medicine. Every second person who's coming over here and buying land now is setting up a retreat center. Ibogaine, ayahuasca. There are places in Costa Rica where you can do everything in 2 weeks. You can do mushrooms, you can do peyote, you can do ayahuasca, and you can do Ibogaine. It's all legal here. And these are wonderful healing tools. I'm not quite sure. They're not recreational. They should be used for healing. But all of these things are opening up, all the original plant medicine and everything, right? It's so wonderful to see.
That was beautiful.
And we've got to 8:30, so we'll have to wrap this up for this show.
Yeah.
But I'd love to invite you on for one more time, Bruce, because what I wanted to specifically talk about, I did talk about was going into John Edmonds, more into that realm. So I think next show we can start with that. But it's really incredible to meet you, Bruce, and again, Laura, for coming on the show as well. I really connect to your material as well, and thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, you're quite welcome. Thanks for having me.
And how can people get a hold of you, Bruce?
Well, I mean, if you want to buy a book, it's Bruce MacDonald, M-A-C, the Scottish spelling. MC is Irish, by the way, folks. So when you call me McDonald, it's like calling a Romanian a Hungarian or something like that. Please don't do that. Bruce MacDonald. And yeah, I definitely recommend A Stardust Ranch and The Galactic Historian. And then middle of July, I'll re-release my first novel, which is very spiritual too, even though it's fiction, and it's an incredibly spiritual story. Insanely funny and entertaining, you know, and there'll be an audiobook and a hardcover of that. So yeah.
Wonderful. And Laura, how can people get a hold of you?
At the moment, Laura Massey at btinternet.com, or my current Facebook page, until we get Two Feathers Medicine properly up and running. But thank you so much, Dale, for having me on again. It's been great. Bruce, it's been wonderful to reconnect. We need to do a Stardust Ranch special.
2 weeks. I'm on holiday for a week, so a few weeks I'll message you and Bruce. We'll
Just schedule it. I'll be there.
Brilliant. Well, thank you everyone for watching.
Much, guys.
And thank you, Laura.
Guys.
Thank you, Bruce. Everyone
Thanks.
have a great solstice. Take care.
Yes.
Bye-bye.